I couldn't sleep after my wife died. Every night, I was tormented by visions of her final moments. I tried getting rid of her things. It felt nice seeing all those trash bags lined up by the curb, but removing the evidence of her presence didn't help. I saw her everywhere, and I still couldn't sleep at night. Maybe she wouldn't let me rest because she couldn't rest, my brain reasoned. Maybe there was something wrong with her resting place. I filled an oversized duffel bag with the parts still left in the freezer and dragged them into the woods behind our house. When I reached the top of the hill with the scenic overlook she'd liked, I dug a hole and buried them. Surely that'll make her happy, I muttered to myself as I hiked down. I climbed into my bed that night at 9 p.m., excited to rest. But as soon as I closed my eyes, I saw stained carpet and glassy eyes, not to mention the tufts of hair hanging on my hammer. I couldn't stay in the house any longer. How long can a person go without sleep anyway? I had to move out, and I couldn't sell the place. Who knows what an inspector might find? My mind played through different scenarios before settling on accidental fire. That would show her, a ghost with nowhere to haunt. The solution made me feel relieved. As I watched the flames climb higher and higher, I silently prayed for a fat insurance check. That night, I checked into a room at a rundown highway motel. I couldn't have cared less about the flickering lights or the faint aroma of cigarettes. Not even the dingy sheets deterred me. Finally, I was going to get some sleep. A few minutes later, I heard the key in the lock.
"Hello, honey,"
she said from the doorway. Her beautiful skin has soured into a sickly yellow, and a large nightcrawler dangled from her eye socket. As she pulled the sheets back and slipped in beside me, I noticed her fingernails were black and broken, probably from clawing the soil. "I didn't expect you here," I muttered. I guess the house hadn't meant much to her either. My eyes shot open, the nightmare having woken me up. A nightmare about my son. I took in a deep, stuttering breath that soon turned into a coughing fit as it caught in my throat. My head swam as I reeled from the pain of my illness and the effects of the awful nightmare as they worked in tandem to rip me away from sleep. I stiffly sat up, my nose a stuffy mess as I looked around the room. All was still in the moonlit summer night, until I broke into another coughing fit that threatened to expel my lungs. I flung myself back into my bed, my head hitting my moist pillow, causing me to sit back up in disgust and turn it over. That's when I felt it, a feeling that something was wrong, very wrong. Goosebumps broke out on my skin as I looked around the room, my dulled senses on full alert. My ears popped when I flexed my jaw reflexively, a habit I had developed when I was trying to figure something out. Nothing looked out of place, but I couldn't shake the feeling of something missing. Gingerly, I swung my feet off the bed, putting on my slippers and meekly standing up. I groaned as I placed my palm to my forehead as I nearly lost my balance, my head pounding for a moment before settling down. After regaining my composure, I slowly walked to my bedroom door. "Dobie?" I called out weakly, nearly breaking into another coughing fit. The feeling was stronger now. Something was very wrong, I just knew it. My maternal instincts kicked in as I remembered the nightmare. I needed to know my son was okay. I listened, popping my ears again as I flexed my jaw. No response, only silence. That wasn't right. I should be able to hear him moving around his room and talking to himself, like he usually did when he stargazed. I shuffled my way to my bedroom's open doorway, leaning on the door frame before calling out again, louder this time. "Toby?" Nothing. After some time, I pushed forward into the hallway, leaning against the wall for support. My throat felt parched and itchy as I realized I hadn't drank any water in a while. Ignoring the discomfort in my throat, I shuffled my way down the hall towards Toby's room. "Toby?" Still no answer. After a few moments, I reached his door and knocked, calling out his name once more before twisting the knob and letting myself in. The room stood empty before me, the lamp on his desk the only source of light in the entire room, an alarm clock next to it reading 2:30 a.m. "Toby?" I said, feeling something amiss now twisting into a knot of dread in my stomach. I looked to the big picture window. Toby's telescope pointed to the sky above the forest outside, a mountain range far in the distance. Next to it, on the floor, lay his sky journal, as he put it, a spiral-bound notebook where he recorded his nightly observations. My little astronomer, I like to call him. A memory flashed in my mind, the two of us sitting at the kitchen table as he gushed about his latest stargazing adventure. I smiled as I sipped my tea, looking over the rim of my cup at his gentle face, lost in the wonder of his own world. Suddenly, my smartphone rings, and I apologize as I answer. It was a call from work. He looked disappointed for a moment, before he smiles and picks up his notebook, getting up from the table. Quietly, he approaches me and whispers, "I'll tell you about the lights later, Mom," before leaving for his room. Something itches in the back of my mind as the memory fades and I make my way into his room. I slowly approach the telescope, bending down to pick up the notebook. My congestion makes it feel like my brain is about to spill out, but I succeed in retrieving his sky journal from the floor. The page is open, and I see his hastily scrawled handwriting. 1:06 a.m. The lights are above the mountain tonight. They haven't moved since my last report. It looks as though two of them have split off from the main object and are circling the area, as though looking for something. I wonder what it is. 1:22 a.m. The lights have rejoined and are now moving across the sky, occasionally disappearing altogether. They're heading in a southbound direction towards the canyon. Perhaps they're attracted to Mr. Murphy's flock? 1:27 a.m. The lights have stopped moving. They're now just hovering in place over the canyon. 1:32 a.m. The lights have disappeared. I tried refocusing the telescope and scanning over the horizon, but I can't make out anything. That might be it for tonight. 2:18 a.m. I was about to head to bed, thinking that was the last of the lights for tonight, but they've reappeared. Resuming observations. 2:22 a.m. The lights are moving in a northward direction, away from the canyon. I wonder what that little trip was all about. 2:23 a.m. The lights have stopped. They're hovering in place again, but not over the canyon. They're hovering over the forest. There's something different about this, almost as if they're considering something. 2:25 a.m. The lights are bigger and brighter. I can make out the main object better now. It looks like a pill. It's heading this way. I'm going to dim the lights. 2:27 a.m. The lights are above. The page flapped in my face, a cold breeze starting up from seemingly nowhere. I looked around, surveying the room once more. It was then that I noticed something I didn't before. A small scattering of shattered glass near the foot of Toby's bed, sitting in a small pool of moonlight. Slowly, I approached the mess, my heart skipping a beat in my chest as I neared, dread building up ever more in my system, scenes from my nightmares flashing in my head. Everything's all right. Everything's all right. Toby just dropped a glass. The moonlight poured in from above, lighting the glass shards up, sparkling like stars on the floor. A breeze came again, pushing my hair in my face. I brushed it away and looked up. I screamed. Toby loved astronomy, and had always wanted to look at the night sky at any given opportunity. He had loved it so much that I had a skylight installed in his room. My little astronomer. Sometimes I would find him, laying on the floor staring up through the night, yearning to touch the sky. I looked at that same skylight now, broken open, the jagged edges of glass dripping crimson. Tears formed in my eyes as I looked at the frame where bloody handprints laid, smeared upwards, as if my son, my Toby, had been dragged up into the night sky. Every night since I was very young, I've heard a light tapping on my window. Just hard enough to wake me up, but it never took much for me to wake up. I've always been a pretty restless sleeper. Every night I would fall asleep, and every night at around 1 to 1:30, I would wake up to the tapping. Tap, tap, tap. I would wake up, slowly turn to the window, and then nothing. Complete and deafening silence. I never saw anything when I looked over to the window, just darkness. Occasionally, I would attempt to ignore the tapping, but every time I tried that, the tapping would become more frequent and louder. If I wanted any sleep, I had to look. So I would slowly turn, look at my window, and the tapping would stop. Whenever I would try to talk to my mom about it, she would always chalk it up to a tree branch tapping my window at night. The tree was never really close enough to my window to hit it, unless there was a strong wind or maybe a storm. I used to sleep over at my friend Corbin's house nearly every weekend. We hung out almost every day when we were in first grade. He was my best friend. Every day we were at each other's house, playing in the seemingly never-ending woods that surrounded our houses. Corbin only lived about a 5-minute walk away from my house, so it was always very easy to see each other. The first time I slept over at Corbin's house, he said he never heard any tapping on his window, and there were no trees nearby. However, every time I slept over at his house, both he and I would hear the taps on his window. Tap, tap, tap. Both of us woke up, looked at each other, and then at the window, and the tapping would stop. We brought it up to Corbin's parents as well, and they both said that it was just the house settling. That made sense because Corbin lived in a 150-year-old farmhouse, so little creaks and taps weren't super uncommon. But the sound of something tapping on a window was very strange to me. I now know that the tapping was neither a tree nor was it the old house settling. One day, when Corbin and I were sleeping over at my house, we decided that we were going to set up a camera outside in an attempt to see what branch was hitting my window. We begged and begged my mom to buy us a camera, and she finally gave in. She took us to Walmart and bought us the cheapest camera that could record video that she could find. We brought it home and she helped us set it up and put it in the tree facing my window. Despite our excitement, we understood that we needed to leave it be to not scare away anything that we might see. After eating our normal meal of dino nuggets and baked french fries drowned in an obscene amount of ketchup, we went upstairs and went to bed. We were feeling as if we were trying to catch Santa Claus on Christmas Eve. As always, later that night, we heard the tapping. Unlike every other time though, we heard a huge amount of rustling, making us worry that maybe the wind had knocked the camera out of the tree. It was particularly windy that day. The taps that night were more aggressive than what they had been previously. They were more of a rhythmic thud against my window rather than a gentle tap. Obviously startled by the new aggressive knocks, we woke up, turned towards the window, and the knocking stopped. We brushed it off and went back to bed. When we woke up the following morning, we were so excited to check the footage from the camera that we skipped breakfast and didn't even brush our teeth until later in the morning. We woke up my mom, and she grumbled and groaned her way downstairs, threw her shoes on, and we went outside. We went to the tree and noticed that the camera wasn't where we had set it up the day before. It wasn't anywhere to be found. Instead, in its place was a piece of paper that had a hand-drawn picture on it. It was one little stick figure being hugged by a huge shadowy being. Underneath one of the stick figures were my initials, as well as a heart underneath the big stick figure. The bottom of the paper said, "With love, my child." The paper also had a flash drive taped to the back. We gave the paper to my mother, and her face turned a ghost white. It looked like all the blood had drained from her face. She told us to get inside and that she needed to make a phone call. She called the police. When they got there, they asked me a few questions. I can't remember what they asked, and really, they only talked to Corbin and me for a few minutes. I remember feeling guilty and scared when I saw my mother crying. There's something especially terrifying when you see your parents cry. It makes things seem so much more real and serious. But still, as a 5-year-old at the time, I couldn't understand the danger that presented itself that day. All these years later, I finally know what was on that flash drive. It was filled with hundreds of videos of me, taken when the taps would happen in the middle of the night. Hundreds of videos and pictures of me waking up. There was one file that was a little bit different. It was from the camera we lost that night. It was a video of my window, exactly where we had rested it so many years ago. When you skim through the video, you see a hand slowly creep up and cover the lens of the camera. The hand was dirty, like this person had been digging holes in the ground with bare hands, and then darkness. I can't remember much after that, or if any of the other strange events of my childhood have any connection to it. But if I remember anything else, I will update later. As of right now, it's time for me to go to bed. It's 12:57, and I don't want to miss my old friend.